Morning, let's get started. My name is Councilmember Gil Schussler, and I'm the Chair of the Finance and Audit Committee. Welcome to the May 25th, 2022 Finance and Audit Committee meeting. The meeting format is hybrid. We do not have a physical quorum present at the moment. However, we're expecting that to occur shortly at the HART administrative offices, and the rest of the board members are participating via communication media technology. Rules for participation and roles and responsibility of the committee are provided in the packet. Please look at your screen on your device. The image of the flag is displayed. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Staff, please do the roll call.
Chair, Julia Mandel has her hand up. I don't know if you want to recognize her before we do roll call.
Thank you. Ms. Mandel, you're recognized.
Good morning, and I do apologize for attending remotely. I have other issues I need to attend to at my home. I understand there is not a physical quorum present. That being said, we can continue forward. We just cannot take any action of the board until we have a physical quorum present. So you can proceed forward with any of the presentations that you need to proceed forward with. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take that. We'll keep that in mind. Okay, staff, please do roll call.
Thank you. Committee Member Kemp?
Here.
Committee Member Knight? Committee Member Overman?
Here.
Committee Member Schisler?
Here.
Committee Member Williams? You do not have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Can everybody on remote hear us clearly enough? We've had trouble in the past with that. We want to make sure that they can hear us up front.
I can hear you,
Very
and
good.
actually I can see the top of your head, so you're good.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay.
I can hear as well.
Okay, great. Next on the item agenda is public comment. Is there anyone pre-registered or present for public comment this morning?
No, sir.
No, sir. Thank you very much. This concludes public input section of the meeting. Next will be our presentation, item 3A, the fiscal 2023 proposed operating budget, proposed capital budget, and 5-year capital plan. Ms. Loretta Kirk, the Chief Financial Officer, will present. Ms. Kirk, you are recognized.
Chair Schisler, members of the Finance and Audit Committee, members of the HART Board, and to Ms. LeGrand, good morning. This is a presentation on the proposed budget. The intent is to discuss the proposed budget and submit this proposed budget to the members of HART, which are the City of Tampa, Hillsborough County, and Temple Terrace, in compliance with the HART Charter. This proposed budget is subject to change based on the feedback from this board, from this committee, and certainly additional review by Ms. LeGrand and staff. So I would refer to this as our base budget. After budget deliberations over the next 4 months, the final budget will be presented to the board in a public hearing on September 26, 2022 for final approval. This is the agenda for today's discussion. We'll look at the budget development calendar. We'll talk about budget assumptions for revenue. We'll look at the schedule of COVID relief funds, talk about projected service, then the budget assumptions for expenses, and then we'll look at the proposed operating budget. In terms of capital, we'll look at the summary 5-year plan, then we'll look at the detail. We'll look at the summary for the fiscal year 23 capital budget. We'll look at the detail for that capital budget. We'll talk about fund reserves, And lastly, the action item and resolution. This is the budget calendar. We reviewed it last week. So today we're doing the presentation. Then we have 3 action items and presentations in June. One is the board action on the 5307 program of projects that we presented to you last week on the 16th. We'll also ask for board action on this proposed operating budget and the capital budget. And then we'll have a presentation on the proposed amendment to the fiscal year 22 operating and capital budget. I'll also mention that we will bring to you the THS proposed budget at that time also. On July 13th, we plan to have public hearings on the proposed amended budget in compliance with the HART charter. You cannot amend the budget without a public hearing. Then on the 18th, we'll ask the board to take action on that amended budget. On July 18th, we also have to talk about the proposed millage rate, the rollback rate, and the date of the public hearing for consideration of the final budget. On August 1st, we'll continue budget deliberations. The plan is to concentrate on the fiscal year 23 service. On August 15th, we'll have another presentation. The intent is to concentrate on the 5-year capital plan and the fiscal year capital budget. And then finally, in September, we'll have the 2 mandated public hearings. The first one, we will talk about the proposed budget and millage. And then on the 26th of September, we'll ask you to adopt the final millage and the final budget. In terms of revenues, our major source of revenue, of course, is ad valorem taxes. The proposed budget has a 9% increase, or an additional $5 million. And again, in compliance with the HART financial policies, we only budget 95% of the ad valorem taxes. Federal relief funding, which has helped us balance the budget over the last few years, the CARES funding was used in fiscal year 20 and 21. CARISA funding will be used this year. And then next year, we'll use ARP for fiscal year 23, and possibly for the amended budget for fiscal year 22, we'll use ARP funding. The fares that you'll see in the projected budget are based on ridership at pre-COVID levels. And then we do have a new FDOT grant of $700,000 for the continuation of free fares on the streetcar. This is a schedule of COVID relief. And as you see, this has given us significant dollars. The total federal allocation for the 3 funding acts was $103 million to HART in fiscal year 20. We used the $16,556,225 of the CARES Act. And then in fiscal year 21, we exhausted the CARES Act by using the additional $23,309,263. And then for fiscal year 22, which is this year, we plan to draw down the entire amount of the CARISA Act, and that is $15,747,431. And then projected for fiscal year 23, right now, the proposed budget is using $19,781,420 of the $47,765,443 that was allocated to HART. This is our proposed service. As you can see, it projects our revenue miles, revenue hours, and ridership by mode for fiscal year 23. For fixed route, you can see the miles, the hours, and the ridership. For paratransit, the same thing, miles, hours, and ridership. Streetcar, and total for HART, we're projecting $10,134,131 in terms of miles, revenue hours, 806,148, and then our ridership is projected as 13,299,865. In terms of expenses, this proposed budget is based on 840 full-time equivalent positions. For ATU, 633, Teamsters, 56, and non-bargaining, 151. The salaries and wage projection certainly includes the impact of recently negotiated labor agreements, as well as the salary increases. The health care is projected in this budget at 10%. I did receive information yesterday that says we're trending towards 14% and a possible 25% increase. That's new information that we will certainly meet with Ms. LeGrand and evaluate, and when we continue budget deliberations, we may have to change that number. In terms of fuel cost projections, you did have a presentation last week on the 16th, and the current projection for fuel is for compressed natural gas, $1.18 per diesel gallon equivalent, diesel $4.20 per gallon, and unleaded $3.40 per gallon. So based on those assumptions and what you've seen so far, this is the operating budget summary. And the next two slides have the operating budget. This is the revenue. Of course, we have to present a balanced budget, so the total operating revenues and the total expenses that you'll see on the next slide, $111,899,629. The ad valorem is projected $61,502,839. We have a small transfer to capital projected, primarily because we did get that increase in 5307 funds, and we used most of it for capital. I just talked about the ARP funding, $19,781,420. Federal operating grants, and that's the portion of the program of projects or the 5307 money that will be used for operations, $4,446,009. State operating grants projected at $8.9 million. Fares, $12,600,000. Local contributions, $2,600,000. Advertising income, $500,000. Other income, $946,900. The Tampa Historical Streetcar, that is a projection at $500,000. We'll certainly have better information when we present the proposed budget to you next month. Interest income, $84,000, again for a total operating revenues projected $111,899,629. In terms of the projected expenses, salary and wages, and you can see the total expenses are projected to increase 5.9% over the fiscal year 22 budget. But we're projecting salaries and wages, $55,113,411. Fringe benefits, based on the salaries and wages, $11,878,590. Healthcare, $10,910,967. And as I mentioned, that was an estimate based on that 10% increase. The contract services, $8.3 million. Parts and supplies, $5.9 million, almost $6 million. Insurance costs, $4.970. Fuel and oil, you can see that significant increase based on the discussion that we had in the projected costs, $6.8 million. Administrative, $3.067. Administrative contract services, $1.6 million. Legal services, $1.2 million. Utilities, $1 million. Marketing and printing, $511,000. Taxes and fees, $382,578, for a total projected operating expense, $111,899,629. This is the proposed and the first look at the 5-year capital plan. So this is fiscal year 23 to fiscal year 27, 5-year plan. The total plan, $351,696,777. This slide outlines the plan by categories and by years, with the understanding that the first column is always the current capital budget. And we'll go through that in detail in a few minutes also. But in terms of the years, fiscal year '23 proposed budget, $45,739,905. Fiscal year '24 capital plan, $66,074,108. Fiscal year '25 capital plan, $60,442,563. Fiscal year '26 capital plan, $55,229,353. And the fiscal year '27 capital plan, $124,213,848. Again, for a total five-year plan, $351,696,777. The next few slides detail this capital plan. The first category, revenue vehicles and maintenance, you can see that's $134,738,582. And you can also just look at the slide and see the various projects and the total by year. I won't read each line, but certainly I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. So this is revenue vehicles and maintenance. In terms of facilities and construction, for the five-year program, $151,138,500. And I'll just pause on each slide for you to review the detail for facilities and construction. In terms of technology, $14,841,559, and you'll notice that we only budgeted for fiscal year '23, so certainly as we move forward, we will have some projections for future years, certainly for any critical infrastructure and technology needs. And this slide has the other categories: bus stops and shelters, $16 million for the 5 years. The BRT, $30 million. You see that programmed in the last year, the 5-year plan. Planning and studies, $4 million. Safety and security, $782,735. And maintenance equipment, $195,401. Again, for a total of $351,696,777. Now, in terms of the fiscal year '23 capital budget, and again, the capital budget is the first year of the 5-year plan. The capital budget proposed for fiscal year '23, $45,736,905 in revenues and in expenses for the project. And I say expenses, but these are projected obligations for capital. In terms of the revenues, we receive block grants, discretionary grants. We will use that very small portion of the ad valorem. FDOT, TCO has committed money for the electric streetcars, and that's budgeted for fiscal year '23. Our 5339 grants, our 5337 grants, our 5307 grant, and the mobility fees, the impact and mobility fees. Total capital revenue, $45,736,905. In terms of the projects, again, the first year of the 5-year capital plan, rolling stock, $22 million. Facilities and construction, $4.4 million. Technology, $14.8 million. Planning studies, $500,000. Bus stops and shelters, $3.2 million. Safety and security, $182,000. 735, and that's that mandated 1% of the 5307 money. Maintenance equipment, 145,000, for a total, in terms of capital projects, 45,736,905. This is the detail of the capital budget for fiscal year '23. As I mentioned, revenue vehicles, $22.5 million, and I'll just pause for you to see the detail of that capital budget for revenue vehicles and maintenance. Facilities and construction, $4.4 million. Technology, $14.8 million. Bus stops and shelters, $3.2 million. Planning and studies, $500,000. Safety and security, $182,735. Maintenance equipment, $145,401. Again, for a total fiscal year '23 proposed capital budget, $45,736,905. In terms of fund balance reserves, this is where we expect to end this year, begin next year, with a reserve of $30,013,632. And based on this presentation, staff will request that this body review the committee action item and recommend the HART Board of Directors approve the fiscal year 2023 proposed budget and authorize the Chief Executive Officer to submit the approved proposed budget to the City of Tampa, Florida, Hillsborough County, and the City of Temple Terrace, and advance this item to the full board at its June 20th, 2022 regular board meeting. And with that, Mr. Chair, that completes the presentation. I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. I'm sorry, I forgot to turn on. Any questions for committee members for Ms. Kirk?
I could do some. Thank
Ms.
you
Kemp,
for the
you're
budget
recognized.
presentation. And I guess I just wanted to point out or ask about a couple of things, and I'm sorry I don't have the slides. I'm very pleased to see, first of all, that there's 16 million being spent on bus stops. And I think that's really important. I think our bus stops are, having recently traveled a few times and seen and been very aware of what's going on in other places and the work we need to do in terms of that. I'm pleased to see that item added in. Thank you. Thank you so much. Also, as well as, I guess I was looking at the fuel costs and I guess that was maybe the page where it was $1.18 for CNG, $4.20 for diesel, and $3.40 for, there we go, $3.40 for unleaded. And that's something to note. I was somewhat surprised by the $1.18 for diesel gallon equivalent for the CNG. And I know we're increasingly going for CNG. We've also looked for electric buses, and we have some electric buses. And then I saw the 5 years of bus replacement and rolling stock. It looked like that was very much weighted to the 2027. Is that the way it works with the 40 buses, that there would be just a few each year? Or I'm not sure how that quite
Well, we certainly have that expert here. I'm going to refer to Scott Drainville, the Chief of Operations, to talk about the bus replacement program.
Morning, Mr. Chair, committee members, Mr. Grant. Just for the record, Scott Drainville, Chief of Transportation and Maintenance. So as far as the vehicle replacement, that just goes along with our actual transition plan to transition by 2035 into our electric vehicles. So you see the first year, we'll start our pilot with TICO, and then the bus purchase will be around 16 months for the actual get the receipt of the vehicle, and about 9 to a year for the infrastructure. So that's why you see that void between that 22 and 23 and 25. And then CNG will keep us, so right now it's our most efficient mode of power, so we're going to transition, hopefully by 2035, into the majority of electric. But we want to collect the data from our pilot before we really commit to what zero emissions we actually want to go to.
In terms of, thank you. Thank you for that explanation. And then this is just a more general question. It looked like our costs are increasing by about 5.9% a year. This isn't with the rolling stock. This is just with the budget in general. Thank you for that answer. It looks like our costs are increasing by about 5.9% a year, but our ad valorem millage is 5% this year. Is that correct?
We have projected ad valorem at 9%.
Oh, 9%. Okay. I'm not sure why I missed that.
But we also know that the current inflation rate is 8.6%. So we're
I
trying
missed
to,
both things, I guess.
oh, I didn't mention that, but we're certainly trying to keep the growth in our costs less than inflation. And so, we'll have to hold the line on our costs so that we can afford to, continue operations.
Right. I just think it's important for the public to realize that as the other costs are going up, ours are going up exponentially as well. So I just thought it was a point to make.
If I may,
Sure.
just to go back to the first question as far as why the numbers are so high in FY '27 for the rolling stock. So in looking at our replacement plan, our fleet replacement plan, and then also anticipating having additional revenue, the thought there is by that time we can order additional buses outside of just replacing our existing fleet. So that's why you see an increase in the dollar amount, because now we're going to be bringing on additional buses into our fleet instead of just one-on-one replacements.
Okay, any other questions for Ms. Kirk before I get started?
I have a question, please.
Ms. Overman, you're recognized.
Thank you very much. This is great information, very helpful. I'd like to ask some questions regarding the COVID relief funding slide. There we showed that the American Rescue Plan dollars were, federal allocation was $47 million, and we budgeted $19 million for 2023. And I was curious about the remainder amount. And I was looking for the slide that shows where those ARP dollars are deployed in future years, or what is the plan for the Delta? The reason I asked that question is we talked about a replacement plan in 27 for existing buses earlier. Thank you, Ms. LeGrand, for that information. But as you can see on the slide where we look at the ridership, that not only has our ridership improved and increased almost across the board, actually all the way across the board, everywhere in all of the HART system, we're seeing an increase prior, in greater than what we saw in 2020 and 2021. With the current pressures we're starting to see economically for families that are transit dependent, as well as those that weren't transit dependent before but may become because of the high cost of housing, the likelihood that ridership number would increase if we had more buses where we could add more frequency. So I'm curious, given that we're seeing a high inflation rate on the cost of equipment and everything else, the delta here, the 32 and change, or 30-something and change, or 20-something and change, is it possible that we could actually purchase more buses and bring more buses online for increasing frequency on our established lines prior to, 2027?
I would just respond, Commissioner Overman, that the ARP funding is for operations. When we received the funding last year, it was noted that the funding has to be obligated by 2026. So right now, we use 19 million for fiscal year 23, and you can see that our operating revenues only cover about 82% of our operating expenses. So the COVID relief is for 2021, 22, 23, and future years is really needed. So we have about $28 million that we can use in future years, and we have until 2026 to obligate it. So we can use it in 24, 25, and 26 to exhaust it.
Okay, that's where I was trying to get. I couldn't see that ARP dollars that are on this slide were listed on the other budget items to show where we're using those dollars for those operations. So thank you very much for making that clear. I just may have missed it somewhere in the spreadsheet. But I did want to say, if there's any, it's my understanding, and it may be different for transit than it is for other agencies, but the ARP and other descriptions I've seen have been where we were to, we could use capital investment where it would make an economic impact or address those that were impacted or, severely disadvantaged as a consequence of what happened with COVID. And that's what we're seeing around the county in some cases, and transit is one of those relief valves. So increasing our frequency to allow more people to choose to use transit when 1 hour interval just can't serve them well, that was where I was going. So if we don't have that capital, we don't have it, but it would be nice if we could. But thank you very much for explaining that. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And that's really all I had.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Mandel, your hand's up.
Excuse me. I understand from the slides that the intent is that this item is to be heard and finalized for final action at the June 20th board meeting. And so I can correct the record, it's my understanding that at today's meeting, we don't have we have a quorum, but not a physical quorum in place. We will need a physical quorum in place at the June 20th meeting in order to approve the final budget. And I understand that may be a problem. So I think we need to, and we can't really go past that. This has to be approved by July 1st. So I want to make that statement for this record and want to make sure that we can obtain a physical quorum at that meeting. Otherwise, we cannot proceed forward.
Okay, thank you. Point noted.
And to the chair and to the attorney, I just want to clarify, this is not the final budget, this is a proposed budget. She had mentioned final budget.
Agreed.
I apologize, but I do know that an action needs to be taken by July 1st.
That's
I'm not
correct.
attending the final budget.
Okay, I have a few questions, Ms. Kirk. I'm sorry, Scott, how many buses total for 22 were I think it said 22 million was spent for capital for rolling stock? How many buses have we procured or ordered or spent or paid for?
So for the 22?
For 22.
22, we just had a receipt of 16.
Okay.
So for FY '23, the 9 million, we're looking at 15 CNG buses.
15 buses?
CNG buses, yes.
Okay, all right. So, all right, that'd be good. Okay, now, Ms. Kirk, your questions. When we make our presentation, we don't do an actual current year projection. That sounds an oxymoron, but we're taking a budget that's going from fiscal '22 that we set almost a year ago, and then we're coming in with fiscal '23, which we're trying to ascertain now. But where do we stand in the interim? Our labor costs, our fuel costs. I can't build a bridge from '22 to '23 if I don't know where we are really right this minute. And that's a missing part that I'm sure you guys have it, but as board members, I think we need to have that information also. Where are we projected to be so that when we do budget to budget, that's one thing, but the budget to actual for 2022 could be a 5% increase, and we're only going up 3% for next year. Is there any way we can get that interim bridge information so that we can look at it and say, yeah, we agree, or no, we question, and maybe challenge, your staff to, what's the differential, is my question.
And thank you for that question, and that's an excellent question. And I do have the answer. I just want you to note that we didn't present the proposed or the current in '22 because I had mentioned that we're going to come to you next month with the actual for '22, and if we have to amend it, we're going to do that. The intent here, of course, was to meet the July 1st deadline. So we have the information. Right now, we're trending at 50% of the expected expenses for 2022. So we're actually under budget because this is through 7 months, and if you do 7 months divided by 12, then you should be about 58%. We're at about 50%. So we're really on budget, so to speak, for 2022. And you'll see that detail when we present to you on June 20th. But if there's any information that you need between now and the 20th, I'll be happy to send it to you.
Okay, that'd be good. I'd like to see what that looks like so that we can, we come up with some kind of a bridge between where we are and where we're trying to get to. And of significant importance, as you know, I harp on this, is our fund balances and our reserves. If it wasn't for CARES money, we'd have been in deep, a long time ago. So we can't live off of that very much longer. And I know that you have nothing, I'm assuming we have nothing cranked in here for any of the proposed sales tax monies,
Absolutely.
either old or new or whatever, and so that's good. Short of the bridge, I don't have any other questions. If the bridge might generate other questions, because it just would do so. And I'm trying to stall here to see if we can get our quorum so we can. Okay, I can stall you for I can keep you up there for 3 more minutes.
I have another question, too.
Okay. Well, okay. All right, well, then I'll go ahead and defer it to Commissioner Oberman.
Oh, thank you. I'll start my video back up. To your point about reserves, I would like to see that where we show based on our current numbers and what we know and the bridge that you just asked for, a status on, what the impact is on the reserves that we used or rebuilt as a consequence of the CARES dollars. I believe the board and the financial committee was a little caught off guard, to say the least, when we did the analysis to find that, in, I guess, 19 or 20, prior to receiving the CARES dollars, that we had exhausted pretty much all of our reserves. If that is part of our budget presentation and/or strategic presentation, I think it's critical that the board be aware of how these expenditures without the surtax and with your estimates of increase for projected capital and operating funds are going to impact our reserves, that we have that information as part of our budget presentation. Because it is the board's responsibility that we act in the best way to assure our commitment to our ridership, that we have the operating funds to be able to operate and provide services. And we were at risk of not being able to do that effectively. In the past, we've had the workshop that showed, what our potentials were based on the additional, revolving dollars that we have and where we could or might not be or may be as a consequence of the fiscal cliff we could potentially experience. But I'm not seeing it in this presentation. That may not have been there before, but I think it would be important to help make the case that there are revenues that are necessary in order to be able to avoid finding ourselves without being able to meet the obligations, not only to our citizens that are dependent on transit, but also to our workforce and others that work within the agency to have some confidence that we're planning accordingly based on what our expenses are and our income is. I mean, that's kind of what I think you're doing and we've done with other illustrations, but it doesn't show this in our budget. Is it possible to include that information based on your potential increases that you witnessed with healthcare and other things that could be added to your projections?
Commissioner Overman, absolutely we can show it. We can show anything that this committee wants us to include in the presentation. I would say, and I mentioned it, but I'll stress this point, that if you look at the operating budget of $111 million and look at the operating revenue, if you exclude that $19 million that you have there for COVID relief, then your revenues would be $92 million, which means that we are 18% short. We have to have that $19 million to cover that shortage. And I can develop a chart for the next presentation that will show you what percent that COVID relief added to the budget for you to balance the budget. You cannot balance this budget without significantly decreasing expenses without that COVID relief. And the COVID relief, if we use $19 million this year and you only have $28 million remaining, although you have to use it by 2026, you probably won't make it to 2026 because you only have $28 million. And if you look at the numbers that you've used $15, $19 million a year, that's only going to last you 2 years at most.
Excellent. That's exactly what needs to be presented. Because I think it's incredibly important that we build the case that not that our expenses are too high, but they are high because that's what it costs to provide transit service, right? I mean, that's what it takes to do the maintenance, to hire people, to buy buses, to deal with the cost of inflation. But also it's important for us to make the case that there's clearly not a sufficient revenue stream at the current moment to be able to allow for us to fiducially operate this agency without recognizing that an additional, revenue infusion is absolutely necessary for us to meet our responsibilities. And I think we need to be very transparent about that. And that will help us in finding either partners in helping us achieve this goal, including our voters in the fall, to help them understand why it's critically important that we develop a better revenue mix for being able to provide the services that we're able and need to provide to our communities. And it's not obvious in this. If you parse through the numbers, you can find it. But I think it's really important that we make it readily clear that it's obvious that we're going to need to find other revenue streams to be able to support the agency for the long term. And I don't know if anybody else feels in a similar way, but I think it's critically important that we be as transparent as possible about the revenues that are necessary to operate the agency. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Overman. That's a very good point. Ms. Kemp, you're recognized.
I just thought for the record, I've been on the board since December 2016, so 2017 was the first time that I was really getting introduced to the budget and everything else. And as I state over and over and over again, we are the most underfunded transit agency in the nation, bar none, for a metro area this size, not by a little bit, but by a gigantic amount. And I'll say, starting in 2017, I I was very clear that, I'll say hair on fire, that I was holding up the budget, and we did not, our reserves were our operating funds, and I was very afraid that we wouldn't be able to make payroll by September, the end of our fiscal year, several times in 17 and 18 and 19. And very clearly, our ad valorem taxing revenues, which is what we live on here, our half mil, was not sufficient at all to support this agency in any reasonable way. And it had reduced since the 2007, 2008 crash that had happened. And while we had ridership growing through those years, we had our tax base very diminished by that recession, and it's only recently caught up to the revenue that we were making prior to that. So it has been a critical situation. It's very clear to me, abundantly clear, that we would never be in the position we are now without the extra federal dollars that have been allocated to transit. And we face, this issue. This is pushed off for a few years, the kinds of issues that we've faced forever. If you just look at a history of HART, if you read some articles from the past, you'll just see over and over again, it's a story of cutting to make do with what has been underfunded agency. So I appreciate the point, Commissioner Overman, and if it isn't abundantly clear to everyone that this is the status that we have had, which is just not, just not what we need for the future here in Tampa Bay. We can't have just 30 routes with 19 of them being hourly routes and the other 11 being under half hours. It's totally insufficient, but it's based on underfunding. We have just very, very well and been careful with our resources here at HART. I'm proud of the way that we've made do, but we're looking at this in the future, and it'll be very important to us to look at different resources that we have, including more support through a sales tax for HART in the future, and probably other streams of revenue too, because it's very critical. We're without this lifeline that we've had for these intervening years, we'd be in very, very terrible shape.
Ms. Williams, you recognize.
Thank you. I do want to echo the sentiments of Commissioner Kemp as well. Looking at the dollars and the way they've been spent, and trying to maximize the busing route as well as the dollars that have been granted across the board. When you look at the budget, it looks like as if I've looked at it before. I think I reached out to you prior to this session, Ms. LeGrand, just to get an understanding of the financials and be prepared for a session such as this. And the dollars that are granted and what is expected out of those dollars is good, considering what you have to work with. Do we want faster routes? Yes, we do. Do we want more routes? Yes, we do. And how do we make that happen? And understanding that the pandemic took place, that was a very unfortunate situation for us to have been granted dollars as a result of that, which ultimately has helped our budget across the board last year, this year, and the next few years. And as Commissioner Kemp said, we are going to have to find another revenue stream and understand what we want to accomplish in getting additional routes and how we prioritize those to make that happen. And so I certainly believe this is where we start in what the community wants as priorities, and what the dollars that we have is something that I just want to echo for the record to establish that we're dealing with what we have before us. And thank you for the level of detail and transparency in the conversation as well as we going forward, but understanding that there's critical pain points that we have to address and And we're going to all have to understand what those pain points mean to us in order to deliver a plan that may not meet all needs, but try to meet as many needs as possible. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to add one other point, because we can look at this a different way. We know that transit is a heavily subsidized industry. Your user fees, if you look at user fees, that's your fares. Fares can only pay for 11.27% of expenses. That means your subsidies have to pay for 89% of your expenses. If your ad valorem is paying, 50-something percent, you've got to have other sources of revenues. And as you mentioned, a major source of revenue has been the COVID relief funding, which will be exhausted within the next few years. And we'll put a slide to that effect also. There's a number of ways to look at the issue that we need additional revenues.
Thank you, Ms. Kirk. Ms. LeGrand, do you have any comments that you want to make?
Well, first and foremost, I want to thank Ms. Kirk and the entire team that worked diligently many nights and weekends to put this budget together. They are all sitting in the back of the room.
Can I
So
understand? They have been with me till 11 p.m. on some nights, and I just want to thank them and ask that they stick with me through this process. So if the finance staff can stand.
Please stand, finance team. They have been working nights and weekends tirelessly to get this pulled together, and also ensuring that there was enough time for the leadership team and all departments to actively be a part of the process. So definitely want to recognize them, and if you don't mind giving them a hand of applause. Thank you so much, guys. And I also want to thank you as committee members and board members for helping us to really go through this process and understanding, one, how we can be as prudent as possible. When I started here, I did tell you that I was approaching this opportunity through a business lens. And Ms. Kirk and the team has been helpful for us to really make decisions that are based on business acumen and ensuring that we're not overspending. We're making tough calls that we're going to present to you to get approval to move forward with, and just making sure that we're meeting our current needs of the community, but also doing it in a way that we can provide the best quality service possible. I know there was a statement that it's unfortunate that 2/3 of our routes have frequencies of 60 minutes, and we'd like to change that. But what we can do within this current environment is ensure that our service is reliable. So even though it's 60 minutes and it's not the best, you need to know that it's going to show up. And our team is committed to making sure that that continues to occur. And we're moving in the right direction, making our service more reliable. So just thank you for being with us, sticking with us as we went through this hurdle of the pandemic and understanding and building a new team and helping us to get to this point today.
Thank you, Ms. LeGrand. I'd like to echo the same sentiments pretty much from everybody else. We wanted to be on the Finance Committee because we know we all speak the same tune, and we know how important and critical it is and how hard it's been in the past. It's unfortunate that we had to use COVID. Thank goodness it was there. I think this is a real come-to-God type budget that to the transparency that you guys have put in here and the frankness that you put in here hopefully can tell the story that we're coming to a real crossroads here very, very quickly. Everybody uses words like precipice and cliffs, but these are very real terms. I've done budgets most of my career, 30-some years in business, so I know exactly what you guys have been going through till 11 o'clock at night. So this is not easy. This is a tough document to put together. We have a ways to go. We're not there yet. There's some questions that we have, but I feel confident that we'll get there. I feel confident that with the proper charts and graphs, we can show everybody, here's what we got, and we're coming to the wall. It's going to happen if we're not careful. So in order to provide the service that this organization needs to provide to this community. So anyway, okay, Ms. Kemp, yes, ma'am.
With that, we now have a physical quorum.
Now we have a quorum.
I'll make a motion to move forward with the proposed budget.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Committee Member Kemp,
Yes.
Committee Member Knight,
Yes.
Committee Member Overman,
Yes.
Committee Chair Schisler,
Yes.
Committee Member Williams.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, committee members. Okay, is there any old business? I do. Ms. Kirk, and I told you I was going to ask you this, how are we coming along with our remediation plans from the audit issue? You have any updates?
Yes. We are moving forward. I have just received some information from HR. We've updated one of the job descriptions. We've hired several accountants, so we're fully staffed, or we are going to interview on Friday for a final one, but we have increased our staff. We have, and I'll just ask Laura Ezel to stand up for a second, because I just want you to know, she is the manager of accounting. She is a CPA. And she is putting processes in place, making sure that everything is reconciled every month. And so she's similar to me. She works very hard, and she is working the staff very hard. So we're going to make sure that the errors that they talked about are eliminated. She's putting a process in place for monthly reconciliation, so we don't have to worry about year end and what happens at the end of the year. She's putting those processes in place. So I'm very comfortable with what she's doing, and she and I are interviewing staff, and hopefully by the end of July, as we stated in our corrective action plan, we will be fully staffed.
Thank you very much. And I too have been in that position also, where you're playing catch up, and it's not a fun position, but it's one that once it's done, and we can go forward and not have to worry about it again. Thank you very much. I appreciate the update.
Exciting, and I'm looking forward to have all of the pieces fall into place.
Excellent.
I'm confident it'll all work.
Thank you for your efforts.
And I would just say she's an old-fashioned CPA, so she's having a good time.
Oh, good, good. She's not using green sheets, is she? No green sheets, right? No green sheets. Okay, good. Okay, any new business? Okay, hearing none, this meeting is
I
adjourned.
have a real quick question.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I had my hand up. My apologies. I just had a real quick question. In the budget presentation, it showed, for 20, I'm going back to that slide. Sorry, it showed for 2027, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, shoot, let me find it. There's an item listed for, trying to find the right slide, my apologies. I'll get there.
This is the capital plan?
Yes, ma'am. The fiscal year 23-27 5-year capital plan. It showed under, at slide 16 in the slide deck, if I'm not mistaken. It showed that there was in the bus rapid transit totals, there's 500,000 for 23 for the transportation studies. And then it showed in 27, the 3.5 million for the CSX study. And I believe that has been on the TIP for priority funding. Does that correlate with the TIP projections for when that funding could potentially be made in accordance to the long-range transportation plan, or have we put it there largely due to the revenue stream and the plan for being able to address using moving forward with that study for the CSX line, if it's possible? I know it's being discussed at the TMA meetings, the Transportation Management Area meetings on a regional basis, and I noticed that it's listed under the 2027 capital plan. Is that in line with the long-range transportation scheduling for funding?
If I can just comment on this, the 5-year plan, and it's certainly subject to modifications. We put the items in the year that we thought that they would be allocated. This is allocations, not spending, but this is actually going coming to the board with contracts. That was the year that we projected that would happen. We can certainly look at that, and when we come back to you, or even before we come back to you, we can send you a response to that question. But that's the year that staff thought it would happen.
That's great. And I thank you both and your entire team. This is very clear that we've got some great opportunities. We have some huge challenges. And the focus on, on-time service, reliable service is absolutely the right way to go. And I appreciate all the efforts making that happen. I also recognize that we've had that on our priority list for, 10 years? And so understanding our revenue streams and where it needs to go is also there. But if we're able to take advantage or have matching revenues, that may be required for that grant, and knowing where and how it could possibly occur is an important opportunity given the infrastructure bill funding that's limited through possibly 27, which is why it got my attention. So thank you very much for all the information. I think it's really critical that we help manage expectations on where we can possibly go and how we move forward on expanding service to our ridership. So thanks so much.
Ms. Overman, I apologize for not seeing your hand raised, and with that, we stand adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.